Hi, my name is Greg Canty, and I'd like to welcome you to the Win Happy podcast. I love chatting to people from all walks of life about their lives and their careers, about the choices they make along the way to pursue their happiness, and what winning actually means to them. I hope you enjoy these conversations as much as I do. Thanks for listening. On today's podcast, I chat with communications specialist and author Andy Freed about his book, Lead Like the Boss. When Andy, a lifelong Bruce Springsteen fan, was returning for one of the 95 concerts he has seen, he penned a post on LinkedIn about the leadership qualities of the boss and what we can all learn from them. This post literally blew up and eventually turned into this book. Andy spoke about his own life and career, leadership lessons he learned from working on political campaigns in America, and more importantly, the important lessons that leaders of today can learn from Bruce. He talks about the importance of storytelling, empathy, rehearsing, carefully listening, bringing people with you, and much more. He also explains how teddy bears ended up in police cars. I hope you enjoy the show. Andy Freed, a huge welcome to the Win Happy podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. What part of the world are you coming to me from?
From Boston, United States.
There's one or two Irish people over there, I believe.
We have a handful of them around here. Yeah.
Yeah, my own family are in New Jersey. My brother is. Mum and Dad went out there in the very late 50s for about 5 years. Dad served in the American Army for 2 years, and they came back then in 1963. Mum's sister, her family are still out there and all that kind of thing. So I think it's fairly inevitable, isn't it? The American and the Irish connections that are very...
No, I love the pictures of President Kennedy in every bar in Dublin, and love the Irish flair that we have all through Boston.
Yeah, if you go into Leinster House, which is like the government buildings, there's an American flag it's a flag he presented to the Irish government, and it's framed there and pride of place with everyone. A different leader to the ones we have today.
A little bit.
I might mention. You're a communications specialist, a business advisor. I know you're an author, you're a guest speaker. But if I was sitting next to you on a plane and we started chatting once the orange juice and the peanuts had been eaten and drunk, and we started getting into a conversation, and I kind of asked you that question, but what do you do? What would be the little one-liner you'd give me?
My little one-liner would be I'm in the kind of professional services and consulting business.
Okay.
And then I'd say, let's talk about some other stuff.
Yeah, because I'd be quickly saying, oh God, yeah, and yep. I'd go back into my book or whatever it was when I'd hear that. Yeah, maybe we talk about music. Maybe that's what we might do to begin with.
That might be more fun.
Yeah, I love music. That's a great way to start a conversation. Where are you from initially?
From New York originally. So I just moved up to Boston for university and just never left.
And tell me, were you in the city center? Or?
I was about 20 minutes north.
Okay.
So I was just outside New York City.
Yeah, Mum and Dad were in the Bronx in a place called Sedgwick Avenue.
My dad is from the Bronx.
Yeah, so they loved it. My mum absolutely loved it.
Yeah, my dad grew up in the Bronx. My mom grew up in Queens.
Okay, and what was that like? What was that life like in Mayhem, New York?
Well, I mean, growing up near New York is a fun experience because everything is there. And, from, being able just to go in and see the big buildings when you're a little kid to the trouble you can get in being near New York when you're in college.
Yeah.
It is a unique city to have on your doorstep.
And tell me, what did your mom and dad do?
Dad was a traffic engineer. He just passed in May, but among other things, Dad's great accomplishment was he came up with the idea for the H sign, which leads people to hospitals all over the world, and making that a kind of standard thing that guides you right to the emergency room. So dad had a career as a public servant, and mom was mom. Mom was home baking cookies and making sure we stayed out of trouble.
Yeah, and you yourself, Andy, what were you interested in as a young lad?
So as a young lad, I would say music and sports. I grew up, in New York in the 1970s. I was a big New York Yankees baseball fan. Played water polo, through college and university, and that was a big, part of my life was staying in shape and training. And then loved music, and started to love Bruce, and in the 70s, and just never quit.
When did music grab you? What were the first things that you heard? Oh God, this is a thing. I'm liking this.
So I was born in '68. So you had like the influences and the great bands of the '60s still around and still putting out great stuff. So I would listen to my little AM radio, and eventually got my first Walkman, to be able to play cassette tapes in. But when you think about what was there, it's like, the Who was huge, growing up. Bruce was putting out great stuff, and Born to Run came out, and it was one of the first albums that I ever owned in my life. The Beatles were still, together when I was born, broken up by the time I was really conscious, but their music was everywhere and remains everywhere. So all of that great album-oriented rock, and then so many bands that stand the test of time still today.
Yeah, and was music played in the house? Were your mom and dad music listeners?
Mom and dad liked music, but they were they were big Sinatra fans. So I'll say if you gave me a chance to rattle off my favorite concerts, most of them are Bruce shows. If you go beyond Bruce shows, I did get to go to see Sinatra with mom and dad at the Meadowlands in New Jersey, in the early 1980s, when Frank still had his voice and still had a presence, and that was pretty special.
I saw Judas Priest there. Out
That's
of
pretty
interest.
cool. That's
Yeah.
also pretty cool. A little different crowd than the Sinatra crowd.
Slightly different crowd. Yeah, on a holiday over there when I was 21, I saw Big Country, Judas Priest, and the Eurythmics.
Oh, Annie Lennox.
Annie Lennox from the Eurythmics. There were three quite different gigs, but they were really interesting. The Big Country one was on the pier. They used to have gigs on the pier in New York.
Yep.
So it was like a note. They were all outdoor gigs at the time, and no, except for the Judas Priest gig. That was fairly amazing. What was the first concert you've ever been to?
First concert I ever went to was the Beach Boys at the Jones Beach Theater, in New York.
Yeah. Who did you go with?
I went with my sister.
Cool. Was it good?
My older sister was a great show. It's the Beach Boys outside on the beach. What more can you ask for?
Yeah, mine was Thin Lizzy.
All right.
Yeah, when I was 14, and I was allowed go to the concert hall here, which is actually the city hall. The city council, the big hall that goes with all of their government buildings, and
they make it more fun sometimes.
Yeah, can you imagine just going there, place full of guys in leather jackets and their denims and all of that thing. And the amazing thing, the big memory I have of that night, in that particular hall, there's a real bounce on the floor. So when the gig got going, the whole building was moving. You were just up and down, and Thin Lizzy were
shaking. That's fun.
Yeah, in their absolute prime. It was it was amazing. And to this day, I would say it's still one of the best gigs I've ever seen. And I put that Roger Waters gig that I was talking to you about before we started recording, I put that up there as well. A life without music would be a very empty life, wouldn't it?
It would. It would. It adds so much, and brings such joy to so many.
Yeah. What were the conversations around the kitchen table when you were young?
When I was young, we were probably talking, we were talking, well, certainly about the Yankees, and certainly talking about baseball and sports, talking about current affairs, and kind of what's happening out there. And when I was growing up, we were always kind of aware of the world around us. And dad being a public servant, always made us aware of like the world around us, and the role we could play is in leading change in that world.
So he was one of the early leaders in your life, I'd say, was he?
Absolutely. It's still one of my heroes to this day.
What did he teach you?
He taught me a lot about innovation and a lot about, finding answers to things. A lot of what my dad did was, as an engineer, look to solve problems. And, sometimes the problem didn't require a complicated solution. It required something that just made sense. So one thing my dad did in his career was had the idea that, he was at an accident scene and there was a kid that was terrified because his mom was hurt. And when they were at then when they got back to the hospital, my dad went and bought the kid a teddy bear, and the kid calmed right down. And my dad at that point realized we need more of this, and he went out and made teddy bears standard equipment in every police cruiser in Westchester County, and you see this now worldwide in a lot of places. They'll have bears in the car just for if they have a kid that's having a tough time. And it calms the kid down. And that's because my dad was a dad, and knew, that we would have calmed down from that and applied that. And that kind of thing, though, that's a great example of a simple solution that you can have to a complicated problem.
Yeah, bring on the teddies.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And career-wise, as a young man, when you started trying to figure out how in the name of God am I going to survive in this world, which way was your mind bending?
I started out doing political work. So I started out working for American political candidates, and worked for a gentleman named Paul Tsongas when he ran for president of the United States in 1992, and we won 16 states but couldn't win it all. Worked for a couple of U.S. senators and governors and a lot of folks around politics and public service until I discovered that that was no way to pay back my student loans, which are a pretty big factor in the United States.
Yeah.
It was great work and fulfilling work, but needed to find something that was a little bit more steady.
And what did you study?
I studied political communications and government through school.
Yeah, all of these would-be senators and governors, they must be delighted to have a young, intelligent, enthusiastic Andy who's happy to work for fresh air.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and it was meaningful work. I mean, the folks I worked with, did some great things in the world, and we're striving to do some great things in the world. So I loved that part of my career and learned so much from it.
Yeah. So you spent a lot of time, obviously, pounding the pavements, knocking on doors, handing out flyers, talking to people, watching these leaders or would-be leaders, trying to convince people to vote for me, etc. Who were the best ones? And was it really clear that they were the best? Could you spot that very quickly?
You could certainly spot two things. You could spot some of the best people, and then you could spot some of the best politicians, and it wasn't always the same. So I'll say, as an example, Bill Clinton in the United States is the best person I've ever seen in terms of being a politician and meeting people. If you spend 60 seconds talking to Bill Clinton, you think you're the most important person he's ever met in his entire life. And he just has a gift for doing that, has a gift for remembering people that he might have met, 6 months ago. He'll see them again and greet you by name and, make you feel incredibly important. And that's, that made him one of the best politicians I've ever seen. The best people I've seen, though, are people that just remain true to themselves. And don't kind of give in to the changing winds of public opinion and are willing to stand up for what they think is right. Paul Tsongas is one of those and he was a mentor to me for many years. Angus King, who I worked with in Maine, is one of those. He works as he's an independent in our system, which is unusual. And those folks are still out there now. They're a little fewer and farther between, though.
So having come through that experience of working for politicians, were you still, clear-minded, or did it leave you very cynical and jaded?
No, it left me, if anything, more idealistic, more believing that this is possible, and politics can be an honorable profession and can be a way that you really change things, which makes me bemoan a lot of what's happening in the United States right now.
So you had to pay those loans, you tell me?
I did. So that's where communication consulting came in.
Yeah. In all honesty, what did that political experience teach you coming into the kind of commercial world?
It's a lot about, look, politics is about connecting with people.
Yeah.
And it's about trying to understand your audience and what the audience needs are. It's also about needing to adapt to change really fast. The winds can shift suddenly, or there might be something that happened in the news that you need to react to. So there's a certain cadence and certain way that we work in politics that certainly still impacts how I worked every day today.
Would you say it's a pretty good boot camp for someone who wants to go into communications?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a phenomenal chance to learn so much. I had responsibilities well past my age at 22, 23, working on a presidential campaign that was experience I would never get anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, and your other peers who, did all the fancy colleges and all that and maybe didn't go down your specific path, but suddenly you found yourself working alongside them in the commercial world. I'd say you had not one or two, but a good 10 steps that you were 10 steps ahead of them.
Yeah, no, it certainly gave you an idea. And also politics, you don't have a lot of resources around. So being able to do things without resources and without all of the massive budget to spend, you learn a lot about communication.
Between then and deciding, I'm going to write a book about leadership, I'm going to become a keynote about leadership, I'm going to start talking about
Excellent.
this. So, can you give me the whistle stop tour from the young buck in communications world?
So I spent 25 years with my company, Virtual. And a lot of what we do is working with industry consortia and standards bodies of some of the biggest companies in the world, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, as they're trying to craft technology standards and figure out a way to make things interoperable. And as I did that, recognize that one of the weak spots always is communication. And it's funny, you hear it all the time of people saying that we're unclear on kind of where this is going, what's the message, or so communication is a spot where I saw a lot of folks struggling, but I also saw that communication and leadership are kind of one and the same. And you can't be a great leader without being a great communicator. So I've spent a lot of my time trying to coach leaders and coach folks around communication. Along the way, from my love of music, started to learn a little something from watching Bruce Springsteen, who is the boss of all rock stars, and everyone wants to be a rock star, and that's always been kind of, if you look at somebody's performance review, if I say Greg's a rock star, you've gotten there. So at some point I said, if everyone wants to be a rock star, why don't we look at the boss of all rock stars and figure out what we can learn from him?
And when you're clearly working in commercial land, you're working with a lot of these big companies and everything else, and observing that they're all a little bit lost. Sometimes they're stuck in a cloud.
Yep.
Customers.
Doesn't matter how big your company is. Sometimes they
Yeah,
can get
yeah.
lost.
And at the same time, at the weekends, you're off enjoying your gigs, bopping away, listening to your favorite artist. When did you put that, ooh, these are actually leaders? When did you join those dots? Because that's a particular way of thinking about them.
I will say I was flying back from a concert from a Bruce Springsteen show right before COVID. I was out in Arizona, and decided that I would write a little something for LinkedIn on what I had learned from the show, and started to really think about it in different terms of what had Bruce done and why was this so important for me and what was I taking away from it. And that was kind of the genesis of and that's 6 years ago. That was a little bit of the genesis of the book that I have today, Lead Like the Boss. Started from that post of thinking about little things that Bruce was doing. And one example I'll give you of that is I love watching Bruce and watching his concerts, but my favorite moment of every show is actually at the end. At the very end, when the show is over, Bruce retreats to the back of the stage and he shakes the hand of every band member as they come off the stage, and whispers something in their ear or gives them a hug and thanks them for a great show. And when you hear them talk about it in interviews, they say for 10 seconds every night, Bruce Springsteen makes me feel like the most important musician on the face of the earth. And isn't that what we're supposed to be doing as leaders with the folks that we lead? helping them feel empowered and helping them feel important and helping them feel appreciated. And watching Bruce do that with people he's played with for 50 years and people that he's played with, just on this tour, you recognize that's part of being the boss, is showing appreciation to those around you and how you connect with folks. And, that's one of the many lessons which I've taken away.
And he had a thing or two to say about Minnesota, didn't he? Because he's just after doing a gig
He did.
in
He just put out
Minnesota.
a great track 2 weeks ago, The Streets of Minneapolis. One, I'll give him credit that he actually rhymed something with Minneapolis, which is
That's a challenge.
that's what you can do if you're a great singer or songwriter. But you also, I'll say, like, a leader stands up and has their voice heard when it needs to happen, and that's something which I have a great deal of respect for him for.
And in America, I know that's particularly divisive at the moment. You
It is.
talk about everything.
Everything is divisive in America at the moment.
Might you say there might be a leadership problem that has allowed that to happen?
Yeah, I would say that leadership has fanned the flames of that divisiveness. Which is the shame of it all.
What's happened, Andy?
In America, what's happened is, I think a lot of things have happened that have created an environment where you can very easily be divided. And if you go back to when we were kids, there used to be one newscast, and there was one source of truth. In the United States, it was Walter Cronkite. He was the most believable man in America, and he was your source of truth. Now I'll say between social media, the pervasiveness of cable channels, and the way that media has shifted, you can find your own truth. If I believe, that climate change isn't real, I can watch one channel and they'll reinforce that for me. And I can stay in one tribe on Facebook and it will reinforce that for me. So I think that our ability to kind of stay in our lanes around just like-minded people has been enhanced by the internet, enhanced by cable television, and the pervasiveness of real truth has just disappeared, because we can all have our own version of it. So you then have politicians that appeal to one of those versions of truth, and not others, and divisiveness is the only thing that can come from that.
And I think the politicians go deep mining.
Absolutely.
They exploit those little differences, and they know this is fertile territory.
Absolutely.
I can, and then tag other things onto it and everything else. COVID, I think, accelerated. I always love that idea of the pub. You could head down to the pub on a Friday night to meet your buddies, and if you started talking shit down in your pub, sharing some cuckoo theory that you tripped across on YouTube, your buddies would fairly quickly tell you to shut the F up. What are you talking about? But during COVID, for a good spell, we were all cocooned and everything else. And there was no one sitting alongside you on the bar stool telling you you're talking rubbish now, Greg. Where in the name of God did you come up with that cuckoo theory? And my God, we all just lost ourselves in those dark tunnels.
COVID sort of did not help.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. Of course, we're looking at the whole thing from the other side of the world, and it's just mind-blowing. I mentioned to you that my brother is over there, and the same mother, the same father, I would say the same set of values and everything. And the arguments that we have, well, we have to make a choice. We talk about music and football, even though our teams are so totally different, but that's actually quite safe territory.
Yep.
The minute we enter any conversation around anything topical, the things you see on the main page of any newspaper that you turn over, whether it's the New York Times, the Irish Times, or the Guardian, if I even go near any of those topics, we are fighting within 60 seconds. And I mean horrible fighting.
Yep.
But
and it's tricky. I mean, because the history is such that, like, a lot of the things you see right now, and folks that are now strongly anti-immigrant and strongly America first, no immigrants, forget that In the 1940s and 50s, there were the signs that said "No Irish need apply."
Yeah.
We've just moved from that to other groups. But it's understanding that our country was was built by immigrants and built from people from all over the world, and you continue to embrace that has been hard for us.
And then, as we spoke, you've Bruce Springsteen deciding to do a free gig, come up with a song. You've got these monks that are on a peace march across America with thousands and thousands and thousands of people. I was chatting to a very wise man, a client of mine, and I was getting all depressed watching all of this, saying, "Oh my God, where's this all going to end?" What he said to me was, "I'm not sure if you buy into this." He said, "No, no, 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 be hopeful." He said, "We're in the process of the world pushing itself to the brink. And we're going to have to realize that all these cuckoo theories we have are dangerous and bullshit. And we nearly went over the edge. That we need to go there, possibly like the way the whole world did in 1942, 43, 44, World War II and everything. It's been a long time since then. It's easy enough to forget, but we saw it in Gaza, we see it in Ukraine, and now we're seeing America just imploding. That fight and that war he's picking with the rest of the world. But anyway, Bruce Springsteen. So, yeah, you're figuring out that this boy is a leader, and there's a lot of traits that he's demonstrating every single time I see him on stage that I think any leader, any good communicator could learn by.
Absolutely.
Yeah, go for it. What were the lessons?
Yeah. So among the lessons were, when you watch a Bruce show, the show doesn't happen by accident. It starts out, kind of the genesis of the show starts when Bruce is in his dressing room hours before the show, writing the set list out. And as he's writing the set list out by hand, it's not just a list of songs, it's a list in his mind of what does he want the audience to think, feel, and do during the presentation and during his concert. There's moments when he wants them to be reflective. There's moments when he wants them to be up and singing. There's moments when he might want to tell a story and have silence. But none of that happens by accident. And by contrast, I'll say so many leaders, when confronted with a moment of communication, they just get up and start talking. They're not putting that forethought into what do people need to think, feel, and do. They're just retitling the last PowerPoint presentation and throwing some new slides up there. They're not thinking about the audience and where it's going. So that intentionality and that forethought is kind of where the Springsteen shows start. This is what it's going to be like. This is what people are going to think, feel, and do. Then it's understanding as he's out there, Bruce is the pinnacle of energy. And so many communicators also lose that, of how many Zoom calls have we all been on where somebody's just droning on. And if you're expecting people when you're droning on to be more enthusiastic about the topic than you are, that's just never going to happen. You're the pinnacle of enthusiasm. Nobody cares more than you. Bruce gets that and understands the kind of the performance elements of leadership, and his audience meets him there, and that's important as well.
I've got an interesting perspective on that one. Like that, we were at a conference there a while back, and one of the guys was making a big presentation about God knows what topic. It was chronic. It was a lousy PowerPoint presentation that was delivered in the most appalling way. But something happened in that he received a round of applause. His subordinates all came over to him after and patted him on the back and said, "Well done." And I don't think there were enough people in the room to give him genuine feedback.
Yeah.
So that poor so-and-so probably thought, well, next time I'm going to give a presentation, I'm going to do the same thing. So maybe there's another leadership trait that maybe one of the guys in the band needs to give Bruce a bit of feedback. And he needs to be open to it, doesn't he?
I mean, a big part of leadership is listening.
Yeah.
And, hearing those signs in the audience and, stopping. I mean, so one of the things that also Bruce talks about is The way he knows he wrote a good pop song. And he said Bruce writes two kinds of songs. He writes, the big operatic pieces like Jungle Land, and then he writes pop songs, Waiting on a Sunny Day, Hungry Heart. What he talks about is the way I know I wrote a good pop song is if I can hear 30,000 people singing it back to me.
Yeah.
So then I know I've got a good song. If they're not singing it back or they're singing the lyric back wrong, then I didn't write a good pop song. But that idea of listening to what your audience has to say and listening to, are they singing back? Are they not? Are they just sitting quietly? That's so important for leaders.
Yeah. And paying attention to all of those cues.
Absolutely.
The little bit of feedback to really know and understand when you got it right and where you wind it up or turn it back. Is there a particular concert you went to of Bruce's that was beyond all the other ones, and do you understand why?
Yeah, so I saw him on Asbury, on the beach in Asbury Park 2 years ago, which is where he grew up. And it was, he was playing on the boardwalk. The crowd was on the sand. It was a special environment in terms of just being outside, but a special environment to be steps from where he got his start and where he grew up. And you could see what that meant to him to be back there playing there. And there were 100,000 people who came out to see it, and I was fortunate to be right up front because we ran really fast when the general admission out area opened up. So that show was really, and then that show's coming out on record album for those of you who are old school, on National Record Store on Record Store Day on April 18th. That show's coming out on 5 LPs. So for those that want to listen to it on vinyl, you can on April 18th.
Will you be in the queue for that album?
I've got that album already digitally on my phone, and he released it digitally a while ago. So I'm not much of a vinyl guy anymore.
But I presume you were you?
Oh, absolutely. I've still got the records around.
Okay, so I challenge you as a music fan. Where do you listen to music? Is it in the car, at home, or?
A lot in the car. A lot when I'm in transit, different places.
I challenge you to set up a room in the house where you can put the turntable and just revisit it. It's just
there are some places I go that have turntables that I do enjoy.
Yeah.
And my son is into vinyl.
Yeah, cool.
At 23, he likes listening to his Eagles and his Beatles all on vinyl.
Well done, your son. What's his name?
It's Dan.
Dan. Oh, well, yeah, my second name is Dan. Cool. Well done, Dan. Yeah, the house that I spoke to you about down in West Cork, I had loads of records, so I kind of made that a vinyl-only house. And now it does mean you're up and down every 20 minutes to turn aside and everything else.
Yep.
But you're starting again to listen to these albums from start to finish.
And they tell a story.
Yeah, and exactly. And they deliberately choose a song to open that album. And they deliberately choose a song to finish side one. And then deliberately choose a song to open side two and bring you. So that's a bit like the set list and everything. You speak in your book about the role of storytelling and separately the role of feeling. Can you talk to me about those?
I can. So storytelling is so important for leaders. So often you go to presentations, you go to meetings, and it's just what you described. It's a never-ending series of PowerPoint bullet points. And we're not wired to listen to that. Storytelling has been part of how human beings are wired from the dawn of time. It's why we tell stories to kids at bedtime. So stories are memorable. Stories also connect with the emotive side for people. That idea of telling a story, and that's what Bruce does so effectively during his concerts. He'll pause sometimes, and I can still recite the stories from his albums of his childhood, that he tells on the live album from 75 to 85, because those stories stick with me more than anything. And that, when we talk about the emotive side, I'll say a lot of leaders don't think that feelings matter for them. That I'm just going to kind of deliver the facts and I don't have to worry about my audience's feelings. That's not what it's all about. But if you don't keep that in mind, people might not be able to hear the message you're delivering them. If you haven't given them some emotional and psychological safety, they might not be able to hear you.
Yeah.
because they're thinking about other baggage and other things. So thinking about feelings is just such a critical part of leadership communication that so many leaders leave out.
I'm not sure if you've heard of the artist David Gray. Quite popular, fantastic singer-songwriter. And I went to see a gig of his. And like that, there was a support act beforehand. You know, the usual, this girl comes out, someone, the audience wouldn't have known a whole pile. She's trying her best through the first few songs. And, you know, at that point, the crowd are just filling into the stadium, having a few drinks, chatting to their buddies, not really paying attention. And it was a polite crowd. After each song, you know, she'd get a little bit of a round of applause. And at a certain point, anyway, she thanked David Gray for the opportunity of gigging with him and all that kind of thing. And she said the first time she played with him was in the States, and he was doing a particular tour, and it was the opportunity of a lifetime. But an uncle of hers, who she was really, really close to, was on his last legs. And she didn't want to leave because of that. And she told a story about the uncle insisted, if you don't go on this tour, I'll go to my grave never forgiving you. This is something you have to do.
Mm.
But the only thing I insist is when you're on that tour, you send me a text or whatever every single day. And she spoke about going on the tour, and he gave her a few bob because she probably wasn't being paid a whole pile when she was out there. But she spoke about the tour bus and all the fireflies and the lights from them. And that was her memory of that gig. So she wrote a song called Fireflies, and she dedicated that to her uncle. From that moment in the gig to the end, it was night and day between this passive audience who didn't really care about what she was doing one way, but they were going to be polite, they weren't going to be rude, to having everyone's attention and standing ovation type of thing after every single song. And I thought it was a masterpiece in storytelling.
Yeah. It's storytelling, and it's leaders showing vulnerability too.
Yeah.
Which is so important.
You spoke about leadership as a performance. You think, oh, for God's sake, I'm in business. Am I supposed to be a dancing clown here? You know, like I just want to tell you about, go ahead, do your work, please, whatever. But you do need to be a performer at one level. So you've seen the Bruce Springsteen version of it, and yet you've been in the companies advising the senior management and everything. In the people you've worked with, have you been able to transform some of your characters from just business managers to...
Absolutely. And it's understanding that performance doesn't mean that you have to be out there, juggling with your hair on fire.
Yeah.
But it's being cognizant that you're on stage and cognizant that what you're doing and everything about you is communicating a message. So if we're sitting in a one-on-one meeting together and you're telling me about a great idea and I look at my watch, you know everything without my saying anything. Because I just communicated to you and often leaders are doing things like that without even thinking about it. It's their body language in a meeting as others are presenting. It's looking at their watch or starting to look at their phone when something comes up. And you've seen people be really burned by moments like that, where they're not showing support for something, they're not showing interest in something. That's recognizing that as a leader, you're on stage all the time. And if I come into my office and I walk the halls, and I let out a big sigh, and I'm kind of looking at my shoes, people think something's wrong. And and no matter what I say in the staff meeting the next day, if the company's doing great, their answer is, well, we saw you walking around looking depressed. If the company's doing great, what's going on? So it's understanding that you're communicating all the time, whether you know it or not.
And Andy, for the person going up the ladder who isn't a leader, but you have a role within a company, maybe managing a little project or having a bit of responsibility for the first time other than maybe lower down tasks. Can you grab some of these things and start to get the attention of the people above you?
Absolutely. And it's the same thing of thinking about your performance. I mean, thinking about like if it's just a small project, well, If it's a small project and I present it to management, and every time I present as though it's a small project, that's how they're going to regard it. But if I present it as this is important, it's important to me, and we're going to kick butt on this thing, and my small project is going to be the paragon of excellence for our company for years to come, and I'm presenting in that way, they're going to take notice a different way. They're going to frame it a different way themselves. As I said, nobody's going to be more excited about your subject matter than you. So if you present that project as being small, they'll meet you there. If you present that project as being important, there's a good chance they'll meet you there as well. And that's something which I think young leaders need to keep in mind. And no moment is too small to be able to make that impression.
And can you talk to me about the importance of rehearsing?
I can. So everything that Bruce does on stage is carefully scripted out. And I've watched enough shows. I've been to 95 shows to know that when Bruce sings "The Promised Land," he starts out by taking center stage. Then he's going to go to the left, the left wing of the stage. Then he goes to the right wing of the stage. Then he finishes in the middle. But I know the movements that he makes, as does everybody else in the band, so they don't crash into one another. And that's just role definition of knowing that Bruce is going to go left, the saxophonist is going to go right when that happens. So that's how that's going to work. That comes from careful planning and thinking it through. So often, I think communications just become so easy. You and I are talking right now, face to face, with you in Ireland and me in Boston. We just clicked a button and there you were. It's very easy in those circumstances when communication is that easy to just take it for granted and not think about what's going to happen. But taking that moment of forethought and intentionality of, before I click the button for this, the join button for this Zoom, what do I want to have happen on this meeting? What's my role going to be? What's my team's role going to be? That's the equivalent of rehearsing. But it's become so easy that we forget to do that because we're able just to take the stage at the click of a button, or just walk into a room and start communicating.
You've watched him so many times, and you even spoke there, Andy, about knowing which way he was going to move on stage, left or right, not to crash into each other, when he was going to tell that joke or any of those things. Have you seen in any of those gigs, has Bruce ever looked bored to you? As if, oh my God, I'm punching the same old routine out another
No, and
time.
that to me is also important. So a lot of leaders get bored with their own material. And they'll have a message they're trying to deliver to their organization, but they'll get bored of it. And they'll say, well, I've already talked about this. I told about the company goals 3 times. I'm done. Let's talk about something else now. Well, science shows that people need to hear something 7 times to remember it. So if we only talk about it 3 times, that's like, giving up on a drug before the recommended dose. But, on the contrary, look at Bruce. Bruce has played Born to Run live as of today, 1,878 times live. And every time he plays it, he gives it his all because he knows there's 2 kinds of people in the audience. People that have never seen him before, that want to know what all the fuss is about, and he's got to give his all for them. And people like me that have seen him 95 times before, and they're comparing this time to the 94th time. And he wants to show that he hasn't lost his fastball. So he gives it his all every time. But that idea of repeating the same message and giving it your all is something which a lot of leaders need to take to heart.
When you think about leadership today and leaders who aren't the front people in bands and everything, is there anyone out there that you particularly admire that you think they're ticking the box on a lot of these things?
I think there are a lot of people out there that are doing some great work. Both, there's some U.S. politicians, but there's also just people. I mean, look at the people of Minnesota in the United
Yeah,
States
wow.
in the last few weeks, the way that they're standing up in minus 40-degree weather. They're out there protesting and out there standing up for what they believe in. So I think that there's a lot of folks out there that are operating from a place of belief and operating from a place of real energy that we can take heart in.
So we can all be leaders in our own right individually, even though we don't have a big.
Absolutely, whether you have a big stage or not.
Will they prevail? Just out
I
of
think
interest.
I think, to your earlier point, we're coming to a crossroads, and historically, that's happened many times before. It happened, as you mentioned earlier, with World War II. It happened with, before World War One. There was a period of isolationism and, period where the world was heading in some strange directions. So I do think that we're getting to those critical moment that will start to bring people together again.
I guess in a way too, the idea of getting rid of all these dangerous people from Venezuela and the rapists and the pedophiles and all that kind of thing. It's a fine idea in one respect, but I guess when you're on the ground and you see people being dragged from cars and you see people being shot, you see people being terrorized, you see people who aren't citizens of that particular country and they're real people working hard and everything, and you witness and you experience all the hardship. Maybe when it comes so close to home, then those ideas get challenged a little bit. I suspect that's happening now. I think, okay, maybe this wasn't such a good idea after all.
No question.
Yeah.
No question.
Your book, who is it for, Andy?
Leaders of all kinds. I mean, so whether it's emerging leaders or more seasoned leaders, it's anyone who needs to communicate with an audience, and I think that's every leader. And it's understanding that communication is a pivotal part of leadership, and that you can get better at it. That's what it's all about.
Might a Bruce Springsteen fan enjoy the book?
I think a Springsteen fan will enjoy it, and I think even a non-Bruce Springsteen fan will enjoy it. And hopefully we turn you into one at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. How can people get their hands on the book?
The book's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and all major booksellers, or at my website, andyfreed.com.
And you're available for speaking gigs and everything else as well, aren't you?
Absolutely. Would be happy to speak with folks, and always happy to convince anyone who wants to talk about leadership and communications. I'm always happy to kind of get on the phone and just convince with them for a bit.
Cool. And is that hit you on LinkedIn or contact you via the website?
You can contact me again via the website, andyfreed.com.
Okay. So for that young buck who goes to the Bruce Springsteen gig out of pure curiosity, they were dragged to the gig by their best friend or a father or a grandfather even at this stage, giving that kid an education. I want you to give me 3 Bruce Springsteen albums, the one to start with, the one to go to next, and the one to go to third, to get a good flavor of them.
Well, you got to start with Born to Run.
Okay.
And Born to Run was the album that put Bruce on the map. He describes the opening of the album, when we were talking about the order of songs, Thunder Road, as an invitation to come along with him on a long and earthly journey to find a home that you can be a part of. So the way that song opens with the harmonica and the piano is meant to be an invitation for the listener. So start with Born to Run to get invited in by Thunder Road. Then next I would go to, probably I'm going to go a little off the beat, The Tunnel of Love.
Yeah.
Which is a great album, late 80s. It's Bruce with some love songs. It's a different feel to the album, a different song, different sound. It's Bruce without the E Street Band, and some great songwriting. And then lastly, I'd probably go to The Rising. More contemporary. It's his response to 9/11. The lyrics on some of those songs just meet the moment so perfectly. That they continue to. But when you kind of listen to the lyrics of The Rising and the idea of the firefighter going up the stairs, can't see anything in front of me, can't see anything coming up behind, you can really put yourself in the in that moment, and that's what he's so gifted at.
When you talk through those albums, you could probably add into the book, he stays current. He
Absolutely
observes the world and what's going on, and he soaks
and
all
that
of that
is something
in.
which we talk about in the book is how does a leader stay current, and how has he remained the boss for 50 years is something that every leader needs to think about. And you do that by staying out there and not being the one that says, I don't know how to work Zoom, or I don't know what TikTok is. You do that by embracing new trends and learning about AI and learning about things. That's what every leader needs to do.
Is there a particular song of his that stops you in your tracks every time you hear it?
In Thunder Road. Thunder Road for me started out when I got out of college. I loved the lyric of "Your graduation gown lies of rags at their feet." That was for me the sign of now I'm going to go out. My graduation gown's behind me, and now I'm going to go out and change the world. Now there's a line earlier in the song of "You're scared, you're thinking maybe you're not that young anymore." That resonates for me. So that song has stood the test of time for 50 years for me.
Cool. What's happiness to you, Andy?
Happiness for me is spending some time with my family and, spending some time, maybe there's some good music on, but maybe the sun is shining and we're all together.
And winning?
Winning for me is making a difference, making my mark on the world. That's what we're trying to do at my company every day. That's what I'm trying to do every day, leaving the world a little bit better than what I found it.
I've got one last question for you, and it's an optional one. I give you an A and I'll give you a B, and you can choose either or.
All right.
Yeah. So option A is, what was your best day ever? And option B is, can you tell me about a choice you had to make that was really difficult, that changed everything for you?
So I'll take option A first. My best day ever is always tomorrow. Because I've got the opportunity to influence it and it's coming. So for me, I'm somebody that's always looking forward, not looking back.
Okay.
So I don't want to just look back on the highlight film. I want to think about what can I do tomorrow and who can I talk to that I can influence and what are my opportunities. So, the best day is all those days that are still to come.
I like that. Well done. And B, were you going to give me a B as well, will you?
So the B question, let's go back to that. So that was a difficult choice or decision that I've made?
Yeah, a difficult choice that you made that changed the course of your life.
I think for me, it was getting out of doing political work, and making that decision that I had to leave that behind, could still make that a hobby, but couldn't make that my job anymore. That definitely changed my life and changed the path that I was on.
Yeah. Can you sing?
I can't sing a note, can't play an instrument. Still, love music, but never picked it up.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that was my affliction as well, Andy. I just loved it and adored it. And a strange thing, it doesn't matter how many times you listen to it, it doesn't teach you how to sing.
Piano teacher told my parents they were wasting their money.
Yeah. I did piano lessons as a young kid, and the teacher had a particular system. She had a little notebook where she'd take notes for my classes, and those notes would be handed to my mother after the notebook. So the note from my very last one, she sent a note to my mother saying, "Greg is wasting my time, his time, and your money."
That's tough to hear.
I was delighted. That was the end of piano lessons because I hated them.
And I was delighted when my teacher told my parents that as well. It wasn't going well.
Yeah. Andy, thank you so much. I hope to meet you again next time you're in Ireland.
This has been a lot of fun. Thanks. And again, the book it's Lead Like the Boss, and hope the folks have a chance to pick it up.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I learned a lot from our conversation. Thank you so much, Andy. Take it easy. Good man. Thank you for listening to the Win Happy podcast, which has been brought to you by Fusion Communications. If you'd like to get in touch, feel free to send me an email at greg@fusion.ie. So until next time, take it easy.